My first recollection of music was when I was age 3. My parents had bought my sisters and me a record of classical music songs for children, and I had a toy ocarina. And I discovered I could play along with one of the songs. So I called my mother in and said, "Mother, listen to this. This is not an ocarina. That's an ocarina." And it probably sounded just that bad when I played it for her, but she was so proud because she loved me so much, so that was okay. And I was not a child prodigy, though, with music. This is a child prodigy. This is Mozart. He had his first song published when he was 4 years old. This is not a child prodigy. Because while he studied when he was a child, he did not become famous till he was an adult. I was too lazy and spoiled to be a child prodigy, so I waited until I grew up and I could try to be an adult prodigy. So at age 7, I studied violin, then I studied piano at age 9, then clarinet at age 11, and string bass at age 13. But I didn't start practicing in earnest until I got into college. So at age 12, I went to music camp on violin. And it was such a disappointment for me because all the other violinists my age could actually play very well. So I was despondent and depressed. I went into one of the practice cabins. They had a piano. And I sat down at the piano and I discovered I could improvise. I could make up music. Boom, suddenly I knew my passion for life. I would be a classical composer. It was very simple. I also learned in the process that the definition of music is sound that has rhythm, harmony, and melody. End of discussion. That is what music is, period. Boy, was I wrong. Peabody Conservatory of Music, my first year as a freshman, and I was troubled by what was taking place there. My theory class with Mr. Zlotnick was terrifying. It was also life-changing as a consequence. But because I was so lazy, the class that I learned the most from was my English class with Mr. Nottingham, required for all of the freshmen. And it was there that I learned about the avant-garde. What is avant-garde? I'll show you in a minute. I was a fan of the dead white European men's music. That's classical music. And the school had a different idea. They said, we have to get rid of the rhythm, harmony, and melody. And the reason for doing that is it will raise your level of creativity to a higher level. It would be harder to write music if you don't use rhythm, harmony, and melody. And that is what avant-garde, the whole avant-garde movement was. This is 1969, the height of the avant-garde movement in the world. So, to give you an example of an avant-garde piece, this one is similar to one that was performed at my school in a class. It's a little scribble with the words Domine Deus written on it, and the one at the school was flute and soprano. This one is flute and piano, because, or voice and piano. As you heard, I can't play the flute. And it sounds like this. Or it should sound like this. There we go. In my composition seminar class, that's a class where all the composers got together twice a week to share their music, this piece was performed for flute and soprano. And after the performance, they invited comments. And we heard things like, oh, the flute followed the soprano very nicely. The soprano had some really creative ideas. They were really together in parts. Then someone suggested, let's hear it again. So they played it a second time. This time, the comments were like, oh, that was much shorter, but it was much better together. They followed each other much more nicely. They complemented each other better. I asked, and I quote, wait a minute, aren't you judging the performance instead of the composition? And the answer was, which I also quote, was, oh, but the performance is the composition. Now, I did not have the maturity to deal with the politics at the time, so that answer made me leave music school. The dilemma I had was that there are some avant-garde pieces that I actually do like. Normally, I don't like them. So how could I reconcile this? So a piece like Penderecki's Trinity for the Victims of Hiroshima. Is it playing? Nope. Okay. In my English class that I mentioned, this was where I learned about avant-garde. The likes of Marshall McLuhan, The Medium is the Message, Andy Warhol, the artist, who said, art is what you can get away with. And John Cage said, everything is music. Everything is music. Does this mean sound and music are the same? Are we taking away the power of the word music? Is it really proper to dilute and water down the meaning of the word music? This was a difficult quandary for me. Okay. So I got it. Music is not always with rhythm, harmony, and melody. But then, what is it? And again, there were some pieces I liked. When I mentioned the Trinity for the Victims of Hiroshima, was able to capture some of the essence of the tragedy, but it was not music with rhythm and harmony and melody. So let's see if we can figure out what music is by a modern definition, because we have new technologies and new visions that have come up. Over the millennia, we've had changes in social, cultural, and technological arenas, and we have new ways of thinking about things. So let's look at language. How many languages do you speak? People who speak 2, 3 languages, I see. There's a 4. Okay. All of you speak at least one, right? I hope. Okay. Now, what is language? What is language? Okay, I heard very quietly, a tool of communication. That is what language is. It's a tool of communication. So I know for a fact that every one of you know at least 3 languages. So I'll give you an example. What's he saying here? Or here, or there? Okay. Did he speak anything? He's not speaking anything. So what language is that? Body language, right. Okay, so you all know body language. That is a legitimate language. Okay, how about this? What does this say to you? Happy, relaxed, okay. And this? Peaceful. Okay, sad, love, okay, different words. Okay, so did any of this speak words to you? No words. So what language is this? Music is a language. How do we know it is a language? How can we prove it's a language? Aristotle, thousands of years ago, talked about music being language, but that's like poetry. But about 25 years ago, we came up with the knowledge, the proof that music is actually a language. If you speak a language that you understand, the brain works differently than if you hear a language you don't understand. If you hear a language you don't understand, it's processed in the auditory center of the brain. But as soon as you hear a language that you do understand, suddenly the speaking centers of the brain become activated. Okay. This is what one way that we have for identifying language. So what we can look at are some brain scans. Okay. Here is the area of the brain when somebody is creating a melody. Okay. The red areas, that's the part of the brain that's really doing the work. It's not the auditory centers, it's the speech centers of the brain. Here's someone creating a sentence. Now, if we put the two on top of each other, here's what we get. Okay. The turquoise or light blue area, that's both language and music together. And it's most of the part of the brain that is involved with speech, with language. So we know that language, in terms of biology, physiology, neurology, psychology, music is a language. Okay. The problem with music is you cannot say concrete things. You cannot describe objects. Did I say problem? This is actually the great strength of music, is that it's able to express feelings better than any other language. This is what music can express. Okay. It's easier to describe these with music than it is with words. It is the most powerful emotional language that we have that works in the speech centers of the brain. So now we have an idea of coming up with language, with a definition. But first, what you see here is if you have a cat chasing a dog, you can't say that in music. But you might be able to say the feelings of the cat or the feelings of the dog or the feelings of an observer who's watching the chase. This music could be describing a beautiful pastoral scene, a beautiful field with sheep gently grazing and a picnic taking place, a pastoral scene. Or it could be describing a river. If you don't know the music, you wouldn't know which one it is. This could be describing a pastoral scene or a river. You don't know which it is. The first one is actually Smetana's Moldau, a river that goes through the Prague. And he was not describing the river. He was describing the feelings of being around the river, nature. Same thing with Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. He's not describing a beautiful field. He's describing the feeling that you might have in a beautiful field. Okay. So we now have a way of defining music. Nonverbal, it's sonic, meaning that it has sound. It's linguistic, it has a language characteristic, and it's communication. So we have our definition, but not quite. Because is this, let's listen to this instead. We have the wind. Okay, there's wind there. Is that music or is that musical? We very often confuse adjectives and nouns in the arts. Oh, that painting looks so real. Oh, that painting looks so realistic. Okay, so when you hear a bird singing, that is not music. That is musical. So what we need is a human element in music. We need the composer, we need the performer. We can add bird songs to compositions, but what we have to have is a human interaction. So now we have this as our definition. Music is a nonverbal sonic linguistic communication created directly or indirectly by humans. If you make a recording of the bird and you play it as part of the music composition, then it's music. If you simply listen to a bird singing, it's musical. Okay. So is this an academic exercise? We're just trying to play with the terms. It has practical value because teachers have goals and students have things to learn. But what are the goals? In the past, music would be taught as an art. There's a problem with that. In terms of teaching, we have our performers, we have our editors, we have our speakers, but most people, when they learn a language, teachers aren't teaching English or Chinese as art. They're teaching it for appreciation, for understanding. So these people here, they have a way of communicating with family and friends. They can go to movies and performances and understand and appreciate what they are experiencing. If you're teaching music as an art, sometimes there's a little bit of trouble. So what we have to do is teach music as language. When you want to find teachers who teach it as language. When you do this, you have a way for the appreciation to develop. Those who are going to become professionals, they're going to do it anyway, in spite of, not because of, parents and possibly even teachers. So what you want to do is to take your new way of listening to music or sound, find things that are musical, find things that could be part of music, and bring it into your life. You know the language. Some of you even speak the language. Okay. And one last word. If I can get it.